I'd like to welcome to the stage Kate Donaghy, Head of Business Technology at Secret Escapes. Buy versus build. How to get the most bang for your buck.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm Kate Donaghy. I'm the Head of Business Technology at Secret Escapes. Hopefully you've heard of us. Yeah, some noddings. We've had some adverts recently as well, which is great. So my job there is I kind of look after IT, but also lots of the tech we use to run the business, which is a lot of SaaS as well. I do get told I put the SaaS in SaaS quite regularly. But I also look after enterprise architecture and some other bits and pieces. I've been kind of product owner for a lot of that tech for the 4.5 years I've worked there, and I've been in the process of buying tech, be it in my kind of remit or not, for that time as well. I work very closely with our head of procurement, and we do a lot of assessing technology. Now, you probably would have heard earlier talking about buy versus build and kind of the pros of build, and I'll be going into a little bit more detail about the pros of buying as well, and when to use it. So has anyone heard of Wardley mapping? One person. OK, cool. So guys called Simon Wardley, I would recommend looking into this after this session. There's lots of Medium articles, lots of websites about it. There is a lot of pure theory. I won't be going into heaps of it, but I'll kind of talk to you about how this is a useful tool for us at Secret Escapes, particularly assessing the do we buy, do we build question. Now, this is a Wardley map that talks about basically going to a cafe and buying a cup of tea. I will talk through what that means and how we make that happen, but first I'm just going to talk about why we would do Wardley mapping. So the goal is to create a visual representation of your value to your customer, or whoever it is you're talking about. It could be an external customer, it could be, for me, an internal customer, i.e. one of my colleagues. And it's trying to put, in an easily interpretable way, the value you drive, the value you give them, and kind of where you're mapping that on kind of evolution. So we have the value chain. So that's the kind of the axis this way, and then the evolution is the axis along the bottom. There are 4 different stages of evolution. So Genesis is brand new ideas. This is niche. It's on the cutting edge. And this is probably where you're going to map the parts of your business or your value proposition that are unique to you, that are interesting, that are new in the market, new for you as a business. We then have custom built. So that's taking that Genesis idea and turning it into something you actually build. So there's some structure, there's some routine to it, but it's still kind of niche to you. There's some repeatable elements, but it is for you. Then we have products. So this is where you might rent a product to serve a part of your value chain. These are likely going to be things that are not unique to you, that you might need to go and use. And then we've got commodities. So these are things like power, water, the things that you don't control, that are not in your sphere of influence, but you need to be able to serve that value to your customer, be it internal and external. The kind of map starts with thinking about your customer. They are at the top. And basically, the way it kind of works is, at the top is the most visual stuff to your customer or your process, whoever it is. You then work down based on how visual that is, and you kind of map where it sits in these quadrants as to whether you own it, whether you don't own it, if you built it yourself, where is it Genesis. Your USP, so in this buy versus build kind of conversation, my recommendation is, if it is unique to you and your value and your proposition to whoever this customer is, build it yourself. You need the control. That's kind of his point this morning, was that if it's your app that's allowing people to order food, that is a direct influence on your brand with them, their experience as your customer, their membership, whatever it is, of course you would build that, right? You need that full control. You need that ownership of that so you can quickly see the impact you have for your customers. The other thing with the Wardley map is that it doesn't need to be perfect. So this is a useful theoretical tool. It's used to be able to map out the value, to have really helpful, useful conversations with senior people, right? Not everyone understands tech really well. They don't need to. They just need to understand it as much as possible to help you make the decision or for you to guide them in that decision making. So let's talk about this Wardley map. So our customer is at the top. They are who we're worrying about. They're coming to our cafe, and they want a cup of tea. So The things you can see in this product is a cup of tea, there's a bun for them, there's a table service. You're not making the cup for the cup of tea, right? You're not making the bun, maybe you've bought those in because buns is not your USP. Your USP is a lovely cafe and experience they have. You have the table service, and that kind of top section there is front of house, and front of house might be something sort of slightly custom built. But the aim here is talking about you don't need to go and build the table, build the cup to provide your customer the value you want to give them. The next one is a hot water kettle tap, right? You're not going to build your own kettle tap if you're just a cafe, right? Why would you do that? It doesn't need to be that. Same thing with your plates, cups, tea, hot water. You don't need to go and do that or find your own water source to give value to your customer. But there are things you probably do want to put in the Genesis. You go, okay, well, 1 second. What's the new thing we can offer them? Oh, we might give them now kind of croissant donuts. That's new to us, and maybe we'll start making those ourselves. Great, well, let's put that in Genesis, because that is unique. That's a new idea. Let's see how that goes. So my kind of advice here is to use a visual tool to help people make the decision of buy versus build. Now I'm going to talk you through an example of a recent purchase that we made, and I'll talk you through 5 recommendations and things to think about in that process so that you are armed with the right information to make this as valuable as a process as possible. Like, I'm a real strong believer that tech is an investment and you need to make sure you get the most out of it. It's expensive. Everyone does things in a slightly different way, and there's lots of demand from senior leadership to us as tech leaders to make sure we're not wasting money, particularly in a business that is travel. It's been a very difficult 4 years. There's been so many macro stresses that making sure you're getting the value out of this is really, really important. So you want to go and buy some technology. And the first thing is do your research. Look at the marketplace, what's out there, how many competitors are there, how many companies are there, what do they do, how do they differ, what do they think their USP is, how long have they been around for, and really do some due diligence. I would also recommend getting more than one person to do some market research. There can be gaps. Not everyone knows what's out there or where to go, and use your network as well to find out different kind of products. There is a website called G2 as well. I don't know if anyone's heard of G2. Yeah, so G2 is a website where you can go to. You ask specific types of products, and it will give you recommendations of, well, these are all the products that kind of do that. These are the pros and cons. This is how that one works. That's how that one works. So it's a good kind of free tool to just go and find out what might be in that market. Next one is be clear and focused. Again, I think his name is Mark from David Lloyd. He talked about focus and knowing what problem you're trying to solve. Whether you're buying or building, like, you need to make sure you understand that. There's no point buying a piece of technology if you don't really know what it's solving or why it's valuable to you or that it's actually going to help anybody. So make sure you know what that is. Make sure you document your requirements. Make sure everyone understands what those requirements are. And make sure they're really, really, really well documented so that you can come back to them in the future when it gets to implementation stage with that tech, and go and understand exactly what you were trying to do. Next one is understand their business. So with the example I was talking about earlier, we were looking for a tool that would allow us to back up and archive data in our CRM. Now, what's interesting when you get into some of the very big CRMs and the kind of pieces of technology that kind of satellite it is understanding who has invested in what. Typically, these big companies will go to the smaller companies that's filling a gap in their product and go, okay, well, we're going to invest in you. So whether you buy with them or directly their product for archiving and backing up, they're going to get a cut of the pie. So understand their business. Who's investing into them? How is that working? What's their business structure like? So are they structured by territory? Are they structured by skill set or kind of capability? How is that broken down? Because it's really important to know how they run their business and how they structure it so that in future, if you work with them, you know who you're speaking to, how you're speaking to them, and also whether you're going to be speaking to people in different parts of the planet for the same company and how you might be working with them. You also want to look about their pricing model. Now, again, they talked earlier about pricing models. They are so different in different markets, different products. You could be paying per license. You could be paying for storage amounts. You could be paying just a flat fee for the year. So there's lots of different ways by which they price their products, and you need to make sure it's going to scale the way you need to. So this product we were looking for backup and restore and archiving, like, we know that there's going to be a lot of data there. I'm not going to buy a product that's charging me for that data volume because it's not actually going to scale. It's going to be quite expensive, and it wasn't even worth me investing into it. So I went into that kind of conversation with the intention of making sure, okay, I want this to be paid and charged per license rather than for the data volume, so that this actually is not going to start costing me a lot of money in about 6 months' time. So understanding how they do that and how they structure it. And also make sure you understand their list price. So lots of websites and SaaS companies will have their list price. Go in and have a rough idea of how much you think it's going to cost you. Do some rudimentary math at that point as well. You also want to know what their implementation process is like. So do they have a specific implementation process team? Do they have a customer success team? Who is at that company that's going to allow that to be successful and have a good implementation with you? My other question, and I'm not discouraging using partners. Partners are really, really great in these scenarios, but you want to understand the kind of terminology and language being used around that. Recently, we were doing a kind of an RFP into buying a piece of technology. I won't go into too much details about what it was, but they were absolutely adamant that they would not sell us this product unless we used partner X. I feel really uncomfortable with that. And again, I'm not saying this is everybody, but sometimes those partnerships can result in a bit of a dependency there. And at the moment that kind of implementation is done, you kind of get handed a product that you don't really understand. You don't know how it was implemented, what happened, when it happened, the documentation's there. So I'm not discouraging working with partners. They're also great as an extension of your team. But I would just be cautious to what's the messaging around using that partner. And just kind of having your spidey senses out there. Next one is think to the future. So I think it's really, really important that you see any SaaS company as a partner with you as a business. So how are you going to work with them? What do they look like? Culture is super important at Secret Escapes. Like in the buying process, we do take into consideration things like your leadership team. What's the structure? Who's in that? How does your company look? Who is in the meeting in the first sales pitch, and how do they speak to you? Again, we had a recent kind of process. We were looking into buying a piece of technology, and the salesperson who we were speaking to just wouldn't speak to us. He just kept saying to us, I think we should get our VP in touch with you and your CFO. I don't think we should be having this conversation. Just wouldn't even talk to the team of people who were looking at the pieces of technology, assessing it, planning to put the kind of project in place. And that's not really a company we want to work with. So I think you need to take that into consideration, the cultural piece. Do they feel like an extension of you and your team? And how do those things work together? The other thing is thinking about what does the future hold. So yes, they will have their own roadmap, and that might not be perfectly aligned to yours, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. But have they got that? How long are they looking out in terms of time? Is it the next 6 months? Is it the next year? Can you add to their roadmap? What's the process for you to ask to add things to it? Do they have a customer advisory board? I don't know if anyone's heard of a customer advisory board. Anybody? Yeah? Cool. So you kind of go out to your kind of customers that are probably either the biggest users or the most impactful or spend the most money with you. You have a board every quarter or whatever. They'll get you all together and they'll ask you a bunch of questions about what you want to have and see next. And they will help you do that. They'll kind of put that onto their roadmap. So think about that as well. How do they kind of see the future and what they're doing? Last one is negotiate. Do your maths. The amount of kind of negotiations we've gone into, we've done some proxy maths, and they've come back to us with something completely different, with different products that they now asked us to do, with a completely different price to list price. Is, I think, probably every single time. So do your maths. What do you think it's going to be at an absolute max so that you're really, really informed in that? And also when they kind of give you their first kind of proposal of costs with the discount, again, do some maths and think about, well, what might this cost inflate to or increase to in a year's time? Do they have an annual 4% increase by default? Some companies do go just every year at renewal, it'll go up by 4%, unless you do a 2-year deal, in which case it's only 1% or whatever it might be. So project, think what it might be next year and whether you can kind of fix your prices. Also think about what levers you can pull. It's not always about money in the kind of the process of buying technology. there are other things to think about. So what else are you going to be able to offer them? Like, we literally have a list of different things for every partner we speak to. What do we think we can use in this negotiation that's not just money? To kind of have a really good outcome for everybody involved. It's a partnership. This is not a kind of conflict, and negotiation should be an interesting conversation where everyone's respected and listened to. You also need to know what your line in the sand is. Like, what's the absolute maximum you're willing to go to? What's your minimum? What are those lines in the sand? And be willing to stick to them. Like, just don't go in without really an idea of what you're willing to say no to and where you're going to step back. Having that is both a powerful position to be in, but also you can get ahead of yourself and sign up to contracts that are much more expensive than you initially planned, because that hasn't been agreed upfront. And be inventive. Almost every contract we've signed in the last couple of years, yes, one of the kind of elements has been the money, but it's also been like, okay, we will do a video to recommend your product, and you can use that in whatever marketing you want to. Or we'll come to a conference and we'll speak on your behalf and talk about how your product is being used. Particularly younger SaaSes, and particularly in the startup world, that kind of word of mouth and that kind of marketing piece, and that's, particularly if you've got a strong brand, is as powerful as money can be, particularly in those early startups, as I said. So those are my kind of 5 tips in terms of the buying process and how you can use them. This is all kind of the steps in the RFP process. Hopefully people have heard of that, but it's request for proposal. And these are kind of different steps that you should be able to take. And look to people in your business as well who've also got expertise. Ask them about it and speak to your network. As I said earlier, I'm really, really keen to learn from failure. So I thought I would talk you through an implementation that happened last year. Again, I'm not going to go into detail as to who that company is, but I just wanted to share with you 3 of the things that I think I personally failed on, and probably as a team we failed on, that has meant that we're in a very sticky situation this year. First one is we did not document our requirements very well. We had requirements gathering sessions, we kind of wrote some notes, but we kind of expected the partner to kind of do all that for us. And we weren't as active in that process as we should have been. We didn't check those requirements, we didn't make sure we were happy with them, and it meant that we got given a product that was somewhat missold to us, but also didn't actually really do what we needed it to do, but that's because it wasn't documented. We need to come to the party as much as the partner does, and that's something we really, really should have spent more time on and got multiple layers of sign-off on. Really, really, really strongly recommend that one. Next one is timelines. So we had some very, very, very tight timelines for this turnaround. We were getting rid of one supplier, we're moving over to a new one. We'd already been using this product for other parts of our business, and so we kind of assumed things would be a little bit easier. We knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be a problem. That kind of went out the window. Know what your timelines are, know what your deadlines are, keep people accountable, and expect the third party to keep you accountable as well. As I said, it's a partnership. You need to put in as much work as they do. So be really, really cautious of that and bake in extra time. Again, salespeople will tell you, yeah, we can do it in 6 weeks. And you're like, okay, can you really, really do this in 6 weeks? Let's make it 8 weeks. And then, everyone's got a bit of time to breathe. Things that are unexpected can crop up. So bake in extra time, even if it feels like it's going to be more expensive. It's just probably the right thing to do for you guys. And it leads to a far less stressful implementation. And then the final one is check-ins. This is about change management and adoption. So we'd implemented it, it had been rolled out, people were in theory using it. 6 months later, we went and spoke to people and we were looking at doing kind of a next project, and it transpired that nobody was using the product in the way we thought we were. They weren't using it in the way we said we were going to be using it. And actually, for the most part, people just were not using some of the product because they didn't think it was very good. If we'd done better change management, if we'd talked about them about adoption, and if we'd checked in sooner, I think we would not be in a position now where we're realizing that actually there's a lot of work to unteach bad habits and really basically have to re-implement this product. So as I said, documentation requirements are so important to have that covered and shared, and everyone's on the same page. Make sure your timelines are realistic. They are trying to sell you something. They want to make it sound as quick as possible, but just kind of be realistic in that, and just, try to focus on change management, adoption, make sure this is human-focused tech, and make sure they're still using the product the way you thought they were going to be. That's me done.